again, so if you guys haven't read already, today's topic is about gender. Okay? And so I'm going to go over this again. So for everything that we've been talking about so far, right? What has it been? LGBT, marijuana, drugs, alcohol. And so for these types of things, right? This is the whole point. I'm going to read it for us one more time, okay? So Colossians chapter 1, verse 15 to 17 says, "The Son, which is Jesus Christ, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together." In other words, this Bible verse is telling us that in all of creation that we see, everything that constitutes us as a person, every tree you see, every little animal running around, every part of nature, all of it, we can learn more about who God is. Because all of these things were created in and through, for, and by Jesus Christ. And so again, when we look at the creation and we study it, we learn more about it, we can also know the mind of the Creator. We can also see how God is as well and why He made that thing. And so, for example, today, gender. So in the same way, we're going to say that when we look at gender, when we talk about gender, we can learn more about who God is as well. And so, again and again, I'm going to say this, the Lord God makes everything else relevant. Okay? So the Lord God makes everything else relevant. And the question we must ask is, how is fill in the blank relevant to God? Okay? We should not be asking how God is relevant to blank, but instead we should ask how is, in this case, gender relevant to God. Because when we say to God, we're saying that God is the starting point, right? God is the foundation, and everything else stems out from God. Okay? So it's only because of God that all of these parts of life is relevant. And again, I'm going to have this for basically almost all of them. So disclaimer. So today we're talking about gender. And I want to be very, very careful here because I understand that could be many questions, could be many experiences from your own life or people you know. And so of course I want to be sensitive, I want to be gentle here. But at the same time, I still want to get a basic understanding as well about gender. And yes, these are again generalities. So this doesn't apply to everyone. However, it is a basic foundational understanding for all of us, okay? To just kind of build off of and to dialogue about. And lastly, again, educational. So for all of us here, I'm learning just like you guys are and doing, different researches and studies and watching videos and things like this and basically condensing it for you. And then eventually towards the end, showing you guys that, okay, this is the issue and this is what the Bible says and then this is how for anyone who says they're a Christian, anyone who says they follow God or believe in Jesus Christ, this is how we must engage with these lifestyles to continue to show who God is. Alright? So, with that being said, let's begin. So, in case you didn't know, according to APA, American Psychological Association, they differentiate between sex and gender. Okay? Because sometimes, if you guys ever noticed this, when you play sports, for example, when you fill out the application, and sometimes it says sex, sometimes it says gender. And they want you to put male or female, typically. And so with that being said, that means that a lot of times, people have used the word sex and the word gender interchangeably. They were synonymous. They were synonyms. However, according to APA, these words should be differentiated, and they should not be used interchangeably. Okay? So APA would define sex as the biological part of you, meaning your DNA, meaning how you look like, meaning how your body is made up, meaning how your body is made. And so this part would be more like molecular stuff, more like the technical things, the biology. And they say that this sex is assigned at birth. So for example, you didn't choose, someone didn't come up to you when you were my son's age, or hey, do you want to be a boy or girl? No one asked you that, right? Your parents or whatever just says, hey, you're a girl, or hey, you're a boy, right? So APA would say that this was something that was assigned, it was given to you. You didn't ask for it, okay? Based off of how modern science would classify your body and the DNA, the biology behind it, right? So sex, again, is different, in this case, than gender. So then the question is, what is gender? Right? Because I don't know about you guys, but I've heard a lot of people say, oh, I'm not this gender, I'm not that gender, I'm gender fluid, I'm no gender, and I'm just like, man, what are they talking about gender? Like, how can you be no gender if, like, your body, DNA is made up in this way? But the point was they weren't using DNA and gender in the same way. Okay, they were meaning two different things. So what is gender? Well, this is gender. Gender is the socially constructed roles, behaviors, activities, and attributes that a given society considers appropriate for males and females. So let's watch this video and it'll summarize it a little bit more for us.
As children, there is no limit to what we believe we can become. But as girls and boys, we are steered in different directions growing up. This happens because of what we call gender stereotypes, traditional ideas about what boys and girls can or should do. They may not always be obvious, but stereotypes are everywhere, and they start to follow us from our earliest days in the toy store, and continue to influence us when choosing subjects at school. For instance, girls are expected to be good at arts and humanities, while boys are led towards maths and science. When we come across the same stereotypes again and again, they begin to feel natural and start to shape our preferences and career paths. More men go into better paid jobs in the science, technology, engineering and mathematics field, and women tend to choose teaching and social work professions. Acknowledging gender stereotypes and their consequences is the first step towards breaking the mold, so that we build our lives based on our own choices.
In other words, what the video summarized is pretty much gender is more so a expectation that people have given on all of us. Like the guy said, for ladies, gender would be say, oh, you're a lady because you like arts and humanities or to clean up or do things like this. Or you're a guy because you like math and science, you like to work with your hands and things like this. So in other words, according to APA, gender is the responsibilities that society has told you to do. They told us to do. Okay? So this will also give you a visual. Gender is, in other words, this. Masculine and feminine. Have you ever heard that word? Masculine is typically associated with guys. Feminine is associated with ladies. So if you see these traits, let's read a couple of them. For masculine, for guys, okay, the stereotype is that guys are supposed to be logical, guys are supposed to be competitive, guys are supposed to be aggressive, and they're supposed to be the decision maker, the boss. Okay? And for ladies, the expectation is that ladies are supposed to be emotional, ladies are supposed to cooperate, ladies are supposed to be submissive and be a supporter. Now, this isn't coming from me. Okay? I didn't just sit around and write down a list for guys and girls. But this came from a different source. Okay? And this source focuses on how this society has expected guys and girls to act. Okay? So these are just a couple examples of what society expects guys and girls to act. This is what it means to be a guy. This is what it means to be a girl. These characteristics. So the question is, what happens if you don't meet all of these characteristics? For example, what if I am logical, okay? What if I am independent, but I'm also cooperative, but I'm also tolerant. Am I not a guy anymore? Because I don't meet all of these, what the world would classify as male stereotypes. Or vice versa. If you say you're a lady, and let's just say you are cooperative and you are emotional, but then you are also competitive, and you are also the decision maker. So it seems like we're not fitting into the mold that the larger society is saying that we should fit into. So where do we stand if we don't fit into these molds? And so this is where gender identity comes in. In other words, gender identity is your internal feeling of being a guy or being a girl based off of the previous slide standards. Okay? And so we see this picture here. At one end is a blue guy, and the other end is a pink lady. And in the middle is someone who's purple. In case you didn't know, blue mixed with pink is purple. Or blue and red, I guess. But the point is that they're saying that gender, people's expectations of being man and woman, are the opposite extremes, and everything else in between, it's a spectrum. Meaning that man is on one side, woman is on one side. And if you think you don't fit into just being a solely male because of the standards on the previous slide, then perhaps you actually fall somewhere in between, the male and the woman. And if you fall somewhere in between the male and the woman, then you can say you are gender fluid. Does that make sense? Again, there's two ends, okay? One is a man, one is a woman. Keep in mind these characteristics, okay? One side is a man, other side is a woman. So if I said that I'm also emotional, but I'm also logical, I'm also cooperative, but I'm also competitive, that would mean that I wouldn't be, according to this standard, I wouldn't be just here. But I might fall somewhere closer to here. I might have more male characteristics than female characteristics, but I would still be in between. And then I could possibly say that I'm gender fluid, because I don't fit the male model of X, Y, and Z. So in other words, there is a standard running around in our society that says that men should be a certain way and women should be a certain way. And if you don't fit that certain way, and if you feel in the inside that you are actually a mix of these characteristics, then you can say that, I'll just show you. Then you can say that you are, according to Facebook, any one of these genders. 58.
Wait, what?
Okay? So think about these 58 genders. In other words, these are different combinations of male and female characteristic traits. Alright? Different combinations of each. Because, for example, if I don't feel like I'm fully a man, because I'm also cooperative and I'm also emotional, then I can be something else. I can make up a different name for it and say that I'm that gender. Gender meaning that's the way I feel, that's the way I function and I operate and I express myself. Okay? So remember, the assumption is that there is a male standard that's set. It's set in stone. You can't change it. And there's a female standard, the same way, set in stone. And if you don't fit into these standards and you fall somewhere in between, then you are a different gender. You're not male or female, you are something else. Alright? So that's what APA is saying, and that's what they've recorded and they've studied for many people who say they may identify with a different gender. Okay? So it's really based off of the standard of what does it mean to be a man and the standard of what does it mean to be a woman in terms of characteristic. It's not talking about your sex. It's not talking about your biology. It's not talking about the way your body looks, the way your body functions. It's not talking about that. It's just talking about how you feel. Okay, and what you think. But we have to really ask the question, are these standards correct? This standard for being a man, this standard for being a woman, is it correct? But nonetheless, we must ask the question, why are some people transgender? Meaning, why are some people not saying they are fully male characteristics or fully female characteristics? Why do they say they're a mix of these characteristics? As we can see here, there's no simple explanation. However, biological factors, genetic influences, hormone levels, of course, are important. But I would say one of the most important factors is experience. Early experience and later experience in life. In other words, how people have treated you. Okay? How people have treated you. For example, if you grew up and people always, just so many times, so common, and they've come to you and they say, hey, you're not a lady because you don't do this. Or they say, hey, don't do that. And girls don't do that. Girls don't do that, so don't do that. But you keep doing that. So girls don't do that, but you keep doing that, so does that mean you're a girl or no? Same thing for guys, right? No, guys don't cry. Guys don't cry. So if you cry, does that make you a guy anymore? And I'm sure you guys have heard these different stereotypes. Fill in the blank with whatever you've heard. That people say, this is what it means to be a girl. This is what it means to be a guy. But for many people, they feel like that's not true. What if I am a guy who is emotional? What if I know a girl who is also very, very rational, very logical as well? Does that mean they're not a girl anymore? Does that mean the guy is not a guy anymore? That must mean he's something else. And so with that said, experience is very, very important here. Okay? How people have treated other people. What other people have expected from you, from someone else. So experience will shape the way you think about who you are and the way you think you should behave. Alright? And of course, this is an important question as well. How does someone know? How do you know if you are transgender? How do you know? According to APA and World Health Organization, WHO, when you feel like you're not fitting in with your assigned sex, meaning that, again, like I said earlier, if we say that guys don't cry, but I cry, not just for fun, but when my feelings get hurt or when I get disappointed, I cry. But then if I do that and these guys go, oh, you're crying, oh, you're a girl, obviously I'm not going to feel like I fit in with these guys, right? Who are supposed to be the epitome, the picture of what it means to be a male. But I don't fit in. So I'm going to take a step out, and now I'm in the middle, right? Ladies over here, guys over here, I'm in the middle. And I'm like, well, I don't fit in over here, right? But I don't necessarily fit in over here either. So maybe I'm somewhere, kind of like, maybe like in the middle, like maybe like right here. So then I wouldn't say I'm a guy anymore, because these guys don't accept me for that. So maybe I'll say I'm something else. The way I feel, the way I act, okay? And of course, specific wishes to be something else. Like the desire to be something else. Like maybe I didn't feel rejected from these guys, but I just want to be something else. For whatever reason. And lastly, I think this is important. A dissatisfaction. Key word, dissatisfaction of your biological sex, of the expected gender roles or behavior of guys. Meaning that, I don't like it or I don't agree with how the larger culture says that guys should act. And because I don't like it, I'm going to step outside of that. And I'm going to say, hey, actually, I'm a new breed. I'm a new kind of person. Sure, I might be logical and competitive, but I'm also caring and I'm also emotional as well. So I wouldn't say that I'm a guy. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm a girl either. Okay, so people can feel this way. Why they feel like they're a different gender. Because they don't fit in, because they want to be a different mixture of personality and characteristics, or they're dissatisfied. Meaning that this is not okay, that guys are supposed to be this way. This is not okay that girls are supposed to be this way, and I don't want to be that way, so I'm going to be my own thing. Alright? So, that begs the question as well. And if you ever have any questions, just raise your hand anytime, okay? The assumptions. Here's the reason why this idea works. Alright? Number one, identity is based off of the individual. Meaning that I don't care what these guys say. It only matters what I think. It only matters what I say. I don't care what anyone else thinks. It only matters what I think. Okay? Meaning that I tell myself who I am. So this is what people who believe or who do this will believe. I tell myself who I am. Regardless of my experience, regardless of how bullied I was, it doesn't matter. I'm going to rise above that and show myself and tell myself I am someone else than what other people have been treating me. Identity comes from me and me alone. Second assumption, and how this lifestyle can work, is dualism. I mentioned this before. But dualism is a separation of your physical body and your emotions and your character. Meaning that my body doesn't tell me anything about who I am. My body is just a body. It's just a meat suit. What matters, what really matters, is my mind. What really matters is my emotion. It doesn't matter if my body says, I can't do this. What matters is my mind says I can. My heart says I can. So you see a separation. The body is over here, and the mind and the heart is over here. There's a separation of both. So this is why the gender fluid identity works, because they separate the body and they separate the mind and emotion as well. All your body is just a shell. Your body doesn't tell you anything. It's just there. And lastly, they assume they know the definition of what it means to be a man or woman. They say that this is what it means to be a man, and this is what it means to be a woman. Whereas I would say, how do you know that? How do you know that ladies are supposed to function in this way? How do you know that guys are supposed to function in this way? Who creates that standard? Who's the one that put these characteristics together? How do we know if this is what it means to be a guy? Or if this is what it means to be a girl? An even greater question, how do we know if where I stand in that as well? Assuming those definitions are true. So in other words, these three pillars right here, this is why people who say they're gender fluid, this is why it works. Because they assume these three things. Identity is based off of me, myself, and I, that's it. Okay? My body doesn't tell me what to do, only my mind and heart does. I don't care about the limitations of my body. And lastly, I know the definition of man and woman based off of what society has been telling me. Now, if you believe these three things, then yeah, sure, gender fluid might work for you. But are these assumptions true? Remember, assumptions are unproven ideas that we believe. Unproven ideas. Okay? But we just believe it because it helps us make sense of the world. Alright? But enough of the chattering. Alright, let's talk about real life. Okay? So in case you haven't read, I'm sure many of you haven't read, Montgomery County Public School Policy. And I went over this before, but I'm going to go over a little bit more in depth. Alright? So this Montgomery County Public School has a gender section. Okay? They have a position on gender. Alright? And this is the first one. What does it say? This is all the schools you guys go to. Alright? This is what it says. Names and pronouns. All students have the right to be referred to by their preferred name and or pronoun. Students are not required to obtain a court-ordered name and or sex designation change, or to change their student records as a prerequisite to being addressed by the name and pronoun that corresponds to their preferred name. In other words, if I come into one of your schools as a student and I say, hey, I want you to call me she. Whenever you talk about me, you have to say she. You can't say he. And I want you to call my name to be Fantasia. Okay? Alright? I don't need a court order. It doesn't need to be legal. I just want you to do a word-of-mouth transaction. And if you don't do it, teachers can get in trouble for that as well. So here's an example. This is a table showing you the different pronouns. At the top, you see the traditional pronouns. He, she, they, it. In the bottom half, you see the invented pronouns. Ni, vi, spivak, z, or si. these pronouns are supposed to be neutral. Okay? So for example, let's just say these guys, they both say that they're not guys or girls. Let's just say they both say that they are gender neutral or non-binary. So that means that they would tell me as a teacher to call them Z. So every time I talk about these two guys, I can't say, hey, these guys. I have to say, oh, Z did great on their test. Or Z are great study partners, whatever. I can't say, hey, these guys did great on the test. These guys get along well. I can't say that. And if I do, as a teacher, and even students, I could get penalized. This is your school policies. Alright? Secondly, gender-based activities. And this might be perhaps more relevant for you guys. Whenever students are separated by gender in school activities or are subject to an otherwise lawful gender-specific rule, policy, or practice, students must be permitted to participate consistent with their gender identity. Key word, gender identity, which means however you feel on the inside, you can go and compete in that league. So let's let this show you guys what they mean by that. Don't spoil it.
Now, to a GMA exclusive, 2 transgender high school runners, well, they're kicking up dust in Connecticut, taking the top spots at the state girls championship, leaving parents wondering if they have an unfair advantage. Lindsay Davis is here, and you sat down with the track star to talk all about this.
That's right, Michael. We're talking about a subject that's so sensitive that Andrea and Terry, who you're about to meet, felt when it was time to tell their parents that they're transgender, they each revealed it by text, and now they have gone public with it, and they're facing opposition from people who say even though you may feel like a girl, you need to compete against the boys. Terry Miller and Andrea Yearwood dominating the competition at the Girls Track and Field Championships in Connecticut earlier this month, coming in first and second place respectively. And while it was a state race, their wins are making national headlines, not because of what they did, but because of who they are, 2 transgender girls.
When was the first time that either of you found any kind of opposition to you participating on the girls' team?
I was expecting it, so every day I go home, search up track and field high school, Terry Miller.
Because you wanted to know what people were saying.
Yeah.
Some of those comments were harsh. Critics complaining that Andrea and Terry both have an unfair advantage since they were born boys.
At what point do you decide, actually, it's more appropriate for me to be on the girls' team and competing with other girls?
I decided that the summer before 9th grade.
They've both started hormone therapy and say that for the most part they've been welcomed by friends, family, coaches, and administrators with open arms. But there is some backlash from parents and students. 2 petitions were even started in an attempt to change the current rule of the state's governing body of interscholastic sports. The rule states that students are entitled to participate on a team based on their gender identity, how they identify.
The girls athletes are at the physical disadvantage compared to the transgender female.
Bianca Stanescu started one of those petitions after her daughter Selena lost to Andrea and Terry at a track meet in May.
They have naturally testosterone within their body that has been proven to give a physical advantage in sports.
The mom, who was unaware that the girls were already undergoing hormone therapy, has gotten a little over 100 signatures. Medical science tells us that estrogen hormone therapy does change the body, replacing some lean muscle with fat. But of course, everyone is different. Andrea's parents say what's most important to them is the well-being of their child.
Track is number 100 on my list of concerns as a father of a transgender daughter. I'm talking about raising a child for a life. And so is it fair that that child is excluded? Is it fair that that child doesn't feel like they have a place to belong?
It allows her to be who she wants to be, and I think that has a little bit more weight than just winning a medal.
The rules vary from state to state. In 7 states, including Texas, students must play on the team that matches their birth certificate, or have undergone surgery, or have had extended hormone therapy, while the NCAA requires the completion of 1 year of testosterone suppression. Medical research cannot really identify the line where a competitive advantage might exist for trans athletes of either gender.
What do you want to say to other transgender youth, young people, teens who are out there really struggling through this process?
Just follow your heart. Like, don't let other people determine what you do in life.
Let's just play devil's advocate for a moment and just imagine that you were both born girls, and then all of a sudden you had two boys who identified as being girls, and they said, hey, we're going to be on your team, and maybe now you're not performing as well because they are better.
I'm not going to discourage you or try to say, oh, it's not fair. And it was just pushed me to run faster. I'd be happy for them because they get to do what they want. If they're happy, so that should in turn make me happy. And they're brave. They're just different from everybody.
And just to be clear, the mother who started the petition says that she would like to see the girls sit out for a year after hormone therapy before competing with other girls. Now, this is certainly sparking a lot of debate, and it's something that schools across the country are dealing with because an estimated 150,000 teens in this country identify as transgender.
And you know, it's a very interesting argument on both sides.
You can see compelling argument of both.
Definitely, thank you.
Don't be surprised if in your activities, in your sports, that there are people there who don't look like you, biologically don't look like you, and yet they're competing against you. Same competition, same rules, but they can't compete against you because in the inside, in their mind, in their heart, they feel like they are, in this case, a girl, in this case, a guy. Now, if you were listening closely, all three of those assumptions that we just mentioned were touched on by the students. You define yourself, you be you. Don't listen to other people, it doesn't matter. What matters is what you believe yourself to be. Secondly, their body, like they said, born a boy, which means they naturally have a hormone called testosterone, which is proven to give an advantage in sports. But because they know their bodies are different than what they're thinking, they're taking hormone therapy to try to suppress some of the testosterone and get more estrogen, or the female hormone. Alright? So don't be surprised, because this is among us here and now. But then lastly, the last assumption that they touched upon is, I feel like a girl. Think about that though. If someone says, I feel like a girl, aren't they also saying they know what a girl is? How do you know you feel like something if you don't know what it is? So if I say I feel like a girl and I ask you, okay, how does it feel like to be a girl? Would you be able to tell me? This is what it means to be a girl, X, Y, Z. Because if they say, I feel like a girl, they are also saying, I know what it means to be a girl. Therefore, I feel like that. Therefore, I should be able to compete in the girls' league. So all three assumptions, public display there. So don't be surprised. Montgomery County allows for that, all right? And lastly, real life, a couple more. Gender-separated areas. Where facilities are designated by gender, students must be provided access to gender-specific facilities, such as bathrooms, locker rooms, and changing rooms, in alignment with their consistently asserted gender identity. Again, it doesn't matter, okay, how my body looks. It matters what I think. So for example, if I go into your school and I consistently asserted means that I just told you, like I just threw it on you. I didn't prove it, I didn't convince you, I just threw it on you, okay? If I asserted that, then, oh, I'm a girl, I feel like a girl, I feel like a girl. That means that by MCPS policy, I can use the girl bathroom, I can go to the girls' changing room, and I can go to the girls' locker room. Any one of them. And vice versa. Girl for guy. I don't need legal proof. I don't need hormone therapy. As long as I feel like it, I can do it. Okay, so keep that in mind as well. If you ever see this, middle school, high school, whatever, college, this is why. Any?
What if other students of your other classmates don't accept it?
Right, so if the other students, for example, in this case, there's another policy, I didn't put it in here. But for example, let's just say I felt uncomfortable with that, right? Then I would have to talk to my teacher, and my teacher would have to give me a different bathroom to go use. That the other student wouldn't go out of the way to use. So for example, if there's a bathroom next to the gym, okay, and then I knew that that student was going in there and I didn't feel comfortable, and I went and told my coach, because well, we can't do anything about it. So instead of using the bathroom by the gym, just go down the hall, just go by the bathroom that's by your social studies class or whatever. Which, make you late, things like that. So it doesn't matter if you're comfortable with it. They have to accommodate for anyone who says that they are of how they feel on the inside, gender identity, how you feel on the inside, okay? You have to accommodate. And if you're uncomfortable with that, that's your problem, then you have to go to a different bathroom, out of the way. All right? MCPS policy, all right? And so if you ever see any of these signs, which will probably be up, that means that it's gender, what they say, gender neutral. But don't forget, according to APA, what is gender? Gender is your mindset. Gender is your behavior, okay? It's how you behave, it's what you think. That's what gender is. Not sex. Sex is your biology. Alright? So however you believe, you think you are, then you can have access to these things. Not only that, but real-life college applications.
Here's one that I'm scratching my head over. Students at Princeton can now choose from 6 genders when they identify themselves. Look at it. Here's the choice. You can choose one of those 6, okay? Joining us now is Ali Stuckey, blogger at The Conservative Millennial and host at The Blaze. Ali, welcome to the program. I'm scratching, I don't get it. I honestly don't get it. Why is it that Princeton sees fit to offer a choice of 6 genders for incoming students?
Well, this is the same college who released a gender inclusivity language guide that warned their students against using words like forefather or husband and wife. So I think what we're seeing here is that this is not actually about inclusivity and acceptance. This is about indoctrination. Colleges are supposed to be beacons of critical thinking and productive dialogue, but things like this actually shut conversation down, because what it implies is that if you don't believe in non-binary gender non-conformity, then you're a bigot and you're wrong. We should be having scientific, cultural discussions, compassionate discussions about gender dysphoria, but we're not. We're accepting it as reality when it isn't reality.
So, I'm really totally confused. I would have thought that the sexuality of young people is a tricky area. And you don't want to be messing with it. It's a very sensitive age. Don't mess with it. And yet this does exactly that. It asks the question, who do you feel like you are? I'm sorry, Alec, I don't get it.
You're absolutely right, and you bring up a really good point, that sexual identity has become almost the center of who you are as a person, or at least the left has pushed that idea that you are defined by your sexuality, whether it's sexual orientation or how you identify gender-wise. And I think that's why we're having such a difficult time actually discussing this, because this has no longer become a discussion of science or the cultural implications of gender dysphoria. It's become a discussion of emotions, how you feel. This should not be a primarily emotional identity conversation. We should be able to remove ourselves from that and actually have a discussion about the implications this has on society.
You're right. If you don't agree with this, you're a bigot. You're out of it. And that shuts down the conversation.
Yes.
You're right on that one, Alec. Dead right. Now, here's one that I'm...
In other words, if and when you apply for college, there's going to be a box. It's going to say gender, not sex, gender. You're going to click on the drop-down menu, bloop, it's going to be a couple options. How do you identify? All right? And lastly, driver's license. This one's Maryland, but if you look in the spot that says sex on the bottom here, next to date of birth and height, it says X on it. No M, no F, it says X. And that's the link to the MVA to how to change that. You don't need hormone therapy, you don't need legal note, you can just change it based off of your feelings as well, okay? So that begs the big question, how should Christians interact with people who practice this? So this is saying for all people who believe in God, follow Jesus Christ, okay? How do we interact with this? In other words, how do you guys, when you go to school, how should you engage? First and foremost, of course, we start with what we are not, right? We are not fighting against people who say they're transgender. We're not standing outside with protest signs that you're going to hell. No, that's not. It should not be us. Okay? Should not be us. Because who are we to judge someone else? Who are we to condemn someone else? We are not, as believers, as Christians, we are not that. But also, we are not, this is a book written by a Christian, and he says that Christians you can be a Christian and transgender or gender fluid or non-binary. So I'm also saying that we as Christians are not this as well. We as Christians are not fully supportive of people who say they're transgender. We're not fully supportive of anyone who says they're non-binary or anything of that connotation. Alright? So if we're not, protesting against gender fluid, but if we're also not supportive of gender fluid, what are we? We're not in the middle, that's for sure. We are this. We are striving to show the true meaning of gender. The true meaning, okay? Secondly, we are striving in everything we do, as we said earlier, to show that you can know God in and through it. Alright? It's not all about me, okay? The world we live in is me. Me. Everything is about me. Alright? We're saying that as Christians, that's not what it's about. It's not about me. Okay? It's about knowing someone greater than ourselves, beyond our capacities to understand. And yet, He has given us different ways to just have a little sprinkle, a little crust, a little crumb to understand who He is. So here's some Bible verses that can brush upon it. I'm not going to go through all of them. Okay? I'm just going to go through two. I think these two Bible verses are very important on how we understand what they kept saying, gender dysphoria, which means that the way you perceive your mentality, your mindset, doesn't reflect your body, and it doesn't vice versa as well. Okay? So first Bible verse, Romans 8:19 verse 23. I'll read it for us. It says, "For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to fertility, not willingly, but because of Him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption, and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. And not only the creation, but we ourselves groan inwardly, as we wait eagerly for the redemption of our bodies." In other words, in case you didn't know this, everything in this world, all of creation, it is infected with what we call sin. And if it's infected with sin, it's also distorted, corrupt. It's not in the state that it should be, the state that God originally created it to be. All right? So that means that our bodies, think about this. Why do you think that we get sick? Why is there cancer? Why is there the flu? Why is there blindness? Because our bodies, even our bodies, are affected by sin. Sometimes when we think about sin, we only think about, did I lie today? Did I cheat today? But in actuality, sin has its reaches in so many places we can't even imagine. And one of this place is our bodies. Sin has affected our bodies. And this is why in Romans 8 at the end it says, if you are a true believer in Jesus Christ, a true Christian, we are waiting when our bodies will be made new. When our bodies will no longer be susceptible to corruption, when our bodies will no longer die, and our bodies will no longer get sick. This is the resurrection that we will have in Jesus Christ. So sin, again, affects our bodies. It corrupts our bodies. So when people say, I was born this way, we would say, yeah, that makes sense. Because just like my body, your body's corrupt. It's tainted. It's expressed differently than mine, but tainted it remains. In the same way, if someone says, but I just feel it. I just feel like I'm a girl. I just feel like I'm a boy. Or nothing, none of that. I just feel like I'm totally something else. Whereas we would say, yeah, I think that's viable. Because just like you and me, again, our bodies are blemished. All right? Because of sin. And this is why when we become a Christian, if we become a Christian, this is why it's so important. The resurrection in Jesus Christ, redemption of our bodies, this is why it's so important. So we will no longer be corrupted, but we can truly have a perfect body, the way God originally created it to be. All right? And secondly, John, I'm not going to read it for us, but in a sense, it is saying, if you are to see the kingdom of God, if you're going to be in God's household, God's family, God's kingdom, you need to be born again. We're not talking about physical rebirth. We're talking about a renewal of your heart, of your mind, of your goals, of your values, of your emotions. And the only way to be born again is this. Yes, to have the Holy Spirit come, live, and dwell in your heart. But how do you do that? How do you have the Holy Spirit come live in your heart so you can be born again, so you can be in the kingdom of God? How do you do that? John 3:16, as many of us have heard. It's funny because we don't really read John 3:16 in the whole chapter. We only read that one verse. But if you actually read John 3:16, John 3:16 exists because Jesus was originally talking about being born again. How are we born again? Believe in the Son. You will have eternal life. And then receive the Holy Spirit. That is how. Because the Son did not come to judge the world, but to give the world life through it. That is how we can be born again. That is how our sin-inflected, corrupted, decaying, festering flesh can be restored. If and when we put our faith, our trust in Jesus Christ. That is when we can truly be renewed and changed from the inside out and express that. Alright? And other considerations as well. The first one, unity of body, mind, and emotions. In other words, as Christians, we need to know this, okay? Our body, our mind, our emotions are all one. There's no separation. We must stop the separating. Okay? This separation can be anything as simple as, I can do anything when I put my mind to it. Right? Or mind over matter. Right? Because when we say things like this, we are truly pitting our mind against our body. We're making them go in competition with one another. Now, of course, there's a difference. There's such thing as hard work, right? There's such thing as going past your limits, such thing as discipline, of course. However, when you're going to the extent where you are, in a way, just ignoring your body and hurting yourself, simply because you want to fulfill some mental craving you have for victory, then I would say you're starting to separate your mind and your body. We as believers believe that God created mind, body, and emotions to be one. There's no separation, okay? And if you listen very closely to this world will tell you your mind and body are separated. Alright? But along with that, I would say it's also cultural values. Many of you come from Chinese background, okay? Your parents, grandparents. If you were to go ask your parents tonight, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? List some characteristics, list some behaviors on what it means to be a man or woman. 9 times out of 10, much of the characteristics will be different than this American characteristics. Alright? So we must understand that many people's idea and standard of being man or woman is based off of their culture. Your idea might be different as well, because you're raised in a different culture than your parents. But if your parents would ever say to you, this is what it means to be a man or woman. Ladies are supposed to do this, guys are supposed to do this. But then when you go to school or you do other activities, you start to notice, ladies don't actually do that, guys don't actually do that. But why do my parents keep telling me that? Because it's based off of culture. And so we have to understand that when we talk about man or woman, that's also based off of your culture, okay? So Chinese culture might be different than the American culture and have these different standards. Alright, how do you know who's right? I mean, let's be real here. There's over 1 billion Chinese people in the world, okay? How many Americans are there? Maybe a little bit more than 400 million. So if these 1 billion Chinese people say that this is what it means to be a man or woman, and only these 400 million Americans say this is what it means to be a man or woman, how do you know who's right? The majority? And so the question is it really cultural? What is right and wrong about being man or woman? So we have to keep that in mind as well. But these standards are cultural. For example, for guys, why is it that in typical American culture we say that guys need to be loud, outspoken, aggressive, confident? Why do we say that? Guys don't cry. Guys are supposed to be strong. Guys are athletic. Why do we say that? Whereas in the cultures that I come from, and maybe you as well, guys aren't in public. They're not loud. They're not trying to be the center of attention. You know? They're quiet. They speak their turn. And they're not trying to show off as well. So we see these two different contradictions and standards here of what it means to be a guy. And of course you can fill in the blank what it means to be a lady as well. According to American standards and Chinese standards. So how do you know who's right? In other words, we need to keep this in mind, okay? That just because here in the US, they say this is what it means to be a girl, this is what it means to be a guy, are we going to take it, the whole thing as true? Or are we going to actually, let's reevaluate that. Alright? And lastly, what is true manhood and womanhood? I would say this, because we're going to touch base about this in more detail later, but I'll just say this for now. That the only way for any one of us to truly know what it means to be a man or a woman, the only way is not if you read enough books, it's not if you watch enough videos, it's not if you educate yourself enough, okay? It's not if you're Republican or Democrat, alright? It's not if you're American or Chinese, or whatever else. What it is this. In order to know how to be a true man or woman, it's only in relationship to God. Because we as Christians believe what? That humans are created in God's image. Humans are created in God's image. So if humans are created in God's image, then the only way for this image to be fully recovered and fully known is if we are in full fellowship with God. And then God will tell us what it means. So that begs the question, how do we love and serve? Keep it simple, keep it short. Make it clear that we don't support any type of sin. Okay? And we must also remember that all of our biggest sin is not following God. Because the way I see it is that when someone says that they define themselves, what they're essentially saying is they themselves are their own God. Again, if I say I define myself, I'm saying I am God. For myself, that is. That's a sin. Because you are not God. God is God. Secondly, people are people. They want to be understood. In other words, for all of us here, whoever you know, or even for yourself, I would highly encourage all of us to continue to seek to understand. Listen to people. Don't be so quick to make judgments. Don't be so quick to reach a conclusion. But be quick to listen. Be quick to understand where they're coming from. Because earlier we mentioned that experience is a big factor in this. How are we going to know people's experiences if we don't listen? Alright? It's not a debate. We must understand. Thirdly, affirm that all people's identity is God's image bearer rather than an individual. And I mentioned this earlier already. The only way we can know what it means to be man and woman is if we know who God is. Alright? And lastly, very important, the goal is not for someone to conform to the world's standard of being a man or woman. The goal is to represent God. Okay? So if we say we are Christians, if we say we believe in something higher, something greater, the point is not to convince someone to fit into the world's standard of being a guy, or fit into the world's standard of being a girl. That's not the point. And if we think that's the point, then we're missing it all. The purpose of everything is to know and represent God. That's it. Not to fit into a little box, not to fit into a little mold. Alright? And one thing we can learn is the world's definition of men and women are deficient. So again, we're not protesting against, but we're not supporting against gender fluidity idea. However, we can learn something from them, and it's this. That the standard of being a man, the standard of being a woman in the world is wrong. Think about it. Because if the slide I showed you earlier, if that was the standard, wouldn't we all be gender fluid? If that was the standard. The slide I showed you earlier. If that was the standard, that if you had to meet every one of these characteristics to be a lady or to be a guy, wouldn't we all be gender fluid? Because no one can perfectly meet those standards. But we're here to say that that's not the standard. That's the point. That's not the standard. So we must stop assuming that it is the standard. We must stop thinking that the world knows what they're talking about when it comes to being a man or a woman. Alright? And lastly, any questions? I don't think there's any in there. Let me check.